Fourth grade classes, this is the smallest group you'll see, although probably the biggest thinkers in the school. And just as a little bit more, the fourth grade in New York State studies a lot of New York State history for social studies. And it happens to be probably the most tested class in all of New York State. The fourth graders in Bellows will take three very important tests this year. They'll take an ELA test, they'll take a math test, and they'll take a science test, each taking up more than one day for the actual test, but very often days and days of preparation. So they are very happy to relax and to be able to do some great stuff with you during this year where they are really preparing very heavily for some of these tests. So I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. Hi everybody. Well, I'm glad you get the chance to relax too with a little bit of poetry. The nice thing about poetry is that, and don't get me wrong, I love math and science, but if you're doing math, you know that 2 plus 2 has to equal 4. In poetry, you can make 2 plus 2 equal a new number that you created out of your mind. So that's sort of the little difference between some other subjects in poetry. The nice thing about poetry is that each one of you, as poets, has something called poetic license, and that's basically a fancy way of saying I can do whatever I want because it's my poem. And I think that's a pretty cool feeling to have. So today, at the end of our session, we're going to be writing a poem together, and so as we go through the session, we're going to be talking about different ways to get ideas and inspirations. I hope that you're kind of collecting a bunch of ideas for the poem we're going to be writing at the end, because I'm relying on you guys for the good suggestions, and we're going to be writing it together. So first I want to ask you, what does poetry mean to you? When you think of poetry, what are some words or images that come into your mind?
John? Were you able to hear him?
Not
a little
quite.
loud, John Paul.
Computer?
A computer? Oh, humor.
Not humor.
Sorry, humor. Everything I hear, it comes out of humor. Humor, definitely. Poems use humor to be funny, to entertain, to get you to want to keep reading. Very good. So, and as you think of things that you like about poems, maybe you like that they're funny, you can file that away and think, how do I make the poem we're going to write at the end of the session funny? All right, what are some other words you think of when you hear poetry?
Juliana?
Rhymes?
Rhymes, definitely. In fact, all the poems, when I started writing poetry, I thought every poem had to rhyme. And so I would make every line rhyme with the next rhyme. And I didn't realize that you could actually write free verse poetry, no rhymes at all if you didn't want any, until I started reading more literature. And so poems can rhyme, they don't have to rhyme. It definitely gives you a lot of control. Let's get one more word or image you think of when you hear poetry.
Brian?
Made up things?
Made up things, definitely. When you write poetry, you could make up everything. If you wanted, you could write a completely factual or true poem as well. There are many different ways to go about writing poetry. So that's your little introduction to poetry from your definitions of it. If you want to look at a dictionary definition of poetry, it's a pretty long one, but basically what it's saying is poetry is verse writing that is good, well, high quality, great beauty, emotional sincerity or intensity, or profound insight. So to translate that in plain English, it's saying good, beautiful, emotional, and you really mean the emotions, or it teaches the reader, it has a profound insight. I think that's something we can probably manage to do. At least we can hit one of those things. If we can't make it profoundly beautiful, we can make it really good in some way. So something to keep in mind. But ultimately, who is it that decides whether the poem is really good? It's you as the poet and your reader. So don't worry about, oh, is this good enough? I don't know if this is a regular poem. There is no such thing as a regular poem. So today we have lots of poetic license. Oh, and I want to quickly introduce myself. I realized I kind of got started in a hurry. If you're wondering why I'm talking about poetry, my name's Dora Svitak. This is my first book, Flying Fingers, that I published when I was 7, and then this is my second book, Dancing Fingers, that I co-authored with my sister, and it's a series of our collected poems. So you can tell I really love to write poetry. So poetry tip number 1 that I would have for you is look back. What do I mean by looking back? Well, history can be a great resource for your ideas for poetry. History is a lot more than just dates and dead presidents. History is everything that has ever happened to everyone who has ever lived. That means that history is what you did 2 seconds ago, 1 second ago. What are some examples of things you think of when you hear the word history?
Wait,
Like dinosaurs?
Dinosaurs. Very good. So you're really going back there. So maybe you think of dinosaurs from Paleolithic times, or not Paleolithic, sorry. Tell me more about dinosaurs, or any other kind of history.
Luca?
Any ancient times like pyramids?
Pyramids, definitely. Pyramids of Egypt, or it could be pyramids from South America, or it could be pyramids from the Middle East. There are pyramids all around the world, so that gives you a lot of freedom, for sure. What are some other things you think of when you hear history?
Sarah?
George Washington?
George Washington, first president, great. And let's get one more thing you think of when you hear history.
Evan?
Indians.
Indians, okay. So we have a huge range of different ideas here. Some people are saying pyramids, other people George Washington. And that's great because this is all included in history. And if I had gone through every single one of you and asked, what do you think of when you hear history? Probably this session would last a couple of days instead of an hour, because history is just so inclusive. It really includes everything. History is all the songs that have ever been sung, all the paintings that have ever been painted. And history includes your family, too. Ask your relatives about the history they've lived. Raise your hands if you ever asked an elder, so maybe a grandparent, a parent, a teacher, aunt or uncle. Raise your hand if you've ever asked them about their childhood. Ever asked someone older about what their childhood was like? I see some raised hands, great. So what did you hear from asking your grandparents or whoever it was what their childhood was like? What were some of the interesting things you heard?
That we didn't have the type of technology like they did back then.
Yep, they didn't have the type of technology, and in fact, I'll always hear, like, when there are people coming on the news sometimes, it'll be, oh, well, we didn't have cell phones back in the 70s, and we managed just fine, so young people should be able to do that now. You'll sometimes hear things like that, definitely didn't have the type of technologies. I was amazed when my dad said something about how the calculator was such a cool invention. I was like, a calculator, really? So definitely gives you some perspective. What are some other really interesting things you might have heard?
Dana?
That on the television, back then there were only like 5 shows.
Only
Channels.
five? Yeah, only 5 channels on television. Definitely some limited programming days. No, HBO or Showtime or any of the really high cable channels. That definitely. What is one more thing?
Mohammed?
Black and white on TV. Like the
Uh-huh.
No colors. Alright, so we heard a lot of TV things. Maybe some of you heard also about food prices being much lower, so you could buy something for 12 cents instead of $1.20. And there's definitely a thing about technology, calculators being really cool, television being really cool. And another thing that's worth asking, and maybe you'll receive some sort of segment like this later in science, is asking your grandparents about what life was like as far as medicine and whether they had all the medicines and vaccines available then that we do now. And that definitely, again, gives you some perspective. So ask your older relatives about their childhood. It gives you so much personal insight into history. But another thing to remember is that we all are historical witnesses just as much as them, because someday I bet you're going to have a grandkid or a grandniece or nephew ask, well, Grandma or Grandpa, what was life like when you were growing up? And think about how you would answer that. What are some of the big events you would remember that you would tell them? What are some of the historical events that you've witnessed? So think back from the first time you can remember to now. What are some of the big historical events that you remember?
Kyle?
Hurricane Irene.
Hurricane Irene, great, and definitely you're a lot closer to it. We were just watching on the news here in Seattle, so anything else?
You, Mohammed?
Packers won the Super Bowl.
I'm sorry.
Packers won the Super Bowl?
Oh, yeah.
Green Bay Packers won the Super Bowl?
The Green Bay Packers, yeah. I was personally rooting for the Steelers because my cousin goes to school in Pittsburgh. I don't know if that makes me an enemy here, but go on.
Not at all, Evan.
The 85th Macy's Day Parade.
The 85th Macy's Day Parade, great, so you saw it on television, and if your grandkids ask, was that going on when you were growing up, then you can be like, yep, I saw the 85th. All right, let's get one
Okay.
more.
One more, yep. Oh,
My brother was.
I like that one. When his brother was born.
When your brother was born, very nice. So you've all been witness, and I'm sure, let's say your brother becomes president, or even if your brother is not president, then that is definitely a historical event. Seeing your siblings get born, I think that is a huge deal. So your grandkids will have a lot of things to hear from you about when you were little, right? Think of yourself as a historical witness as you go on through life, and you'll be able to realize that we really see a lot of important things happening. It could be Hurricane Irene. For me, I have been around a little longer than you guys, so I remember things like Hurricane Katrina. And there's all these historical events that we've all seen over the course of our lives, and you'll keep on collecting them as years go on. I think it would make a really good poem, maybe even a letter to my grandkids, that would include some things of what you noticed growing up, what you're noticing now, what life was like, obviously writing about what your present day life is like. That could make a very interesting poem. So tip number 1 is for poetry inspiration, look to history. It could be very recent history, stuff that's going on in the news, or it could be something a really long time ago, like the pyramids of Egypt. So does anyone want to throw out a current event, something that's going on in the news right now? Let's get one person.
Current event? Anyone? Something going on in the news right now? Any ideas? Yes, Sarah? War.
There's war going on, so maybe some of you know that the war in Iraq is coming to a close and soldiers are starting to come home. That's definitely a piece of news that would also provide some inspiration for a poem, because being a historical witness and also being a poet means that you not only want to keep track of the big important events that are going on, but you also want to look at them and imagine like you're someone. So maybe you could write a poem from the point of view of someone whose father has been away fighting in Iraq for a long time. Or maybe you could write a poem from the point of view of the pilot of the helicopter that's bringing them back home. There's all these different perspectives that you could take. As a poet, it's super important that you take different points of view. When you write poetry inspired by history, you can choose from thousands of interesting characters. You have lots of events to choose from. You also have lots of people. Who are some of your favorite characters from history, people in history?
Done?
Helen Keller? Oh yeah, definitely Helen Keller's a favorite of mine too. Who else?
Lucas?
Marie Curie.
Marie Curie, very good. I love her story. Who else?
Jonathan?
Benjamin Franklin.
Benjamin Franklin, great. We're seeing some more scientists. Who else?
Ryan?
Columbus.
Columbus, great. So we have quite an interesting array of choices here. Marie Curie, Helen Keller, Christopher Columbus, Benjamin Franklin. Definitely history, as you can see, gives us so many people to work from. You could write a poem about every single one of those people you just mentioned. When you write poems about history, though, you can add your own creative touches. The important thing to remember is that when you hear history and you hear poem, you might think, oh no, this just means that we have to write a big thing about history and it just has to sound cool. That's not true at all. When you write a poem about history, you can add your own flavors in there. It's not a report about history. Not every line has to be fact-checked. it gives you a lot of license. You can imagine how people from the time you're writing about might have talked, acted, or even smelled. So take a look at this picture. You might say, well, it's just a bunch of ladies in really giant dresses. But it's a picture from the 1800s, and this is a time when these hoop skirts are still common, so they would wear these giant hoops underneath to make the skirts that huge. And they look to be at a party or something. Now, if you just saw this picture, you might be like, well, it's just another boring historical picture. But as a poet, you should be looking at this and saying, wow, I wonder what they were thinking. I wonder what that lady on the right is hearing from that guy over there. And you can make all that up as you think would be fun to do. So take a look at that picture, and I want you guys to think, I wonder what's going on. And then let's get an idea as to how you might write a poem inspired by it. So for instance, when I look at this, I imagine what it would be like to be a mouse scurrying on the floor over here. And what the mouse would think, because a mouse would be so tiny, as it's going past this forest of giant skirts. So that would actually be an interesting subject for a poem, the forest of giant skirts. Wouldn't it be funny to be kind of crawling underneath there? And if you were a mouse, you'd be so confused by all these petticoats, and maybe you're trying to find your way out. So that's what I think of. What do you think of looking at this picture?
Some ideas? Hands? Nick?
Giant igloos?
Sorry?
Igloos.
Igloos, giant igloos, great. So again, you're being inspired by history. Maybe you're looking at these huge skirts and you think, what does that look like? An igloo, awesome. What else? How else can you be inspired?
I think this mouse can live under his dresses.
The mouse can what?
They can live.
Oh.
It's so big. I think he can live.
Yeah, definitely. A mouse could probably live inside one of these dresses, just kind of hide out, somewhere on there. That would actually make this poem really funny. You could turn it into a humorous poem. Let's get one more idea. How would you turn this picture into a poem?
A hill. This looks like a hill. The dress looks like a hill.
Can you hear? She says she would make the dress into hills.
Should you make the
To
dress
climb,
into
I
hills? Okay. So we think of hills, we think of igloos, we're looking at the picture and drawing another image out of that, that's great. We might also be thinking of it literally. We could write a poem about what it would be like to go to this fancy party where everyone's dressed up. Or we could kind of insert a new character into here, the mouse, who's scurrying underneath, that means running. So looking at a picture from history, look at it not just as a historian or as a student, look at it as a poet. And that means thinking, what were they saying? What were they feeling? How would it be to be a mouse right there? Okay, so that mouse thing might not work for every picture. It would be kind of funny to try it with all of them, but definitely next time you see one of these, try it out. When you write poems about historical events or characters that you're studying in school, then you can have the chance to use your imagination and really feel the excitement of other people's lives. When you read history, sometimes you might feel, well, I just have to memorize this date and that date for the test. And to tell the truth, I love history, but memorizing dates can wear me down a little bit too. So writing poems lets you bring that to life. Tell me about some things you're studying in New York State history. I don't know a whole lot about New York State history, so I would love to hear what you're learning.
Who's got something to tell Kyle?
The Indians.
You studying about Native Americans?
So what are you learning about Native Americans?
About where they lived and how they got food and how the Indians got moved into our area.
Okay, where they lived and how they got food, very interesting. So that would make, and that might not seem like, oh, an idea for a poem right there, but yeah, you could turn that into a poem really easily. Now, does anyone know how Indians got the name of Indians? Right at the beginning.
Is it?
When Christopher Columbus first came to America, he thought that he was in the Indies, so he called them Indians.
Yeah, exactly. We still, when you read books sometimes, not so much anymore, but sometimes Native Americans are actually still referred to as Indians. And this goes all the way back to Christopher Columbus's mistake when he reached the Americas and thought, oh, I'm in the Indies. let's call them Indians. So it's really funny when you hear that to think, wow, that has its basis in a mistake. And that is something that I think might make an interesting poem about words and where they come from, perhaps. A lot of words have really interesting roots. So when you hear words like algebra or Indians or barbecue, did you ever stop and think, I wonder where they come from? So next time you need an idea for a poem, think of words, and you could definitely get stories behind them, like that one with Christopher Columbus's mistake. See how I thought of Indians from what you were saying, and then that led to words? You can use that same thought process whenever you need new ideas. What's one more thing you learned about New York State history?
One more thing about New York State, somebody new. John Paul, go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry.
When the Empire State Building was built.
He learned when the Empire State Building was built.
When the Empire State Building was built. Great. And when was it built?
I think he stumped himself.
Okay, well, quite honestly, I was asking that because I would love to know. You can definitely really tell I'm not from New York State. Although I have been to New York City quite a few times, but I have never gotten the chance to really go up to your neck of the woods, just taking the train. So think about history. Next time you're learning something for your test, don't look at it as, oh, I just have to memorize this for the test. Look at it as a poet, because I hope after this session that you'll go saying, I'm a poet, and think of everything you look at as possible inspiration. You don't have to focus on famous people or important events. You could write about a time period or a historical event from the point of view of a chimney sweep or a beggar. So this picture might be a little harder to see, but here's a chimney sweep and he doesn't look too happy. He's carrying this big, long stack of wood with a sort of, I guess, puff at the top. That's not the right word, but the part used for cleaning the chimneys out. And he looks kind of cold because he has his hands in his pockets. Identifying these details and then being able to transform that into writing is a skill that you all can have through practice. Next time you just see a picture like this, identify some details, and maybe you could write a poem from the point of view of this poor chimney sweep in the picture. Now I want to go back to the main poetry presentation. We've talked a lot about history and how to look back. There are also some other places to get inspirations, of course. We can get inspirations for poetry from animals. Raise your hand if you have a pet. I see a lot of raised hands. Great. What is a weird thing your pet does that you think would make a good poem?
John.
My dog licks his leg a lot and it turns like rusty brown.
Licks his leg a lot?
A leg.
Oh, leg! I see. He licks his leg a lot. All right, that makes more sense. Definitely. Great. What else?
Alex.
My dog always jumps off the top of the deck to catch a squirrel.
Jumps off the top of the deck to catch a squirrel. Wow, you have a sort of hunter dog going on, I guess. Who else?
Max.
My guinea pig eats so much that it gets chubby.
Gets a what?
Chubby.
Chubby.
Guinea pigs eat so much it makes them chubby. Yeah, well, guinea pigs are fairly chubby. I used to have 2 guinea pigs, actually. I don't anymore, but they're definitely lovely little pets. What else? Let's get one more.
Lucas.
Really weird.
My beta fish is gills flare up, and then he'll have this ring. Looks like he has this big beard, coming from his ears.
That's definitely an interesting image. A beta fish with a beard. Very good. So you see how just by asking a couple questions, you can get all these ideas for poetry. You could write about the beta fish with a beard. You could write about the chubby guinea pigs. There's all sorts of ideas you have that can be used. I wrote this poem about a cow. I had a most annoying cow. Sorry, I should start that over. I have a most annoying cow who lazes in the sun. She torments every hen and sow and has a lot of fun. She gives no milk at all and moos away at night. Even when she's in her stall, she always picks a fight. Eventually she ran away, freedom had great allure. Away, away from her stall and hay, but she left a great deal of manure. So that's my poem about a cow, and it was just inspired by looking at a picture of a cow, and I don't know how I got the manure part, but that's sort of my favorite part of the poem. I know, you never really grow out of your grossness. Another place you can get ideas for poetry is your refrigerator. I know that sounds a little strange, but just take a look. I'm going to run over to my refrigerator and grab something, and I am betting you that it will be something I can turn into an idea for a poem. So. All right, so I didn't have to look too far. I got some cranberries. So what do you associate with cranberries? What are some ideas you could get from cranberries?
Ideas with cranberries? Yeah.
Cranberry juice?
Cranberry juice? All right, so how can we take that further? Well, let's say you're starting the first line of a poem. What do you think you would think of? What would you write about? Look at these cranberries.
First line of the poem, Natalia. But let's give us the first line. Okay, were you able to hear?
I didn't quite hear that, sorry.
She said cranberries, nice and red.
All right, cranberries, nice and red. Anyone want to continue with the next line?
Hey.
Cranberries, red, small but juicy.
Okay, somebody wants to continue with the first line. I guess, are we looking at a rhyming poem?
We could. I just wanted to sort of have a little back and forth, quick maybe 2 or 3 4-line poem. Yeah.
Okay, look it.
They're really happy when they go to bed.
Are you okay? You need to speak up and speak to the speaker if you can.
They're really happy when they go to bed.
Cranberries are really happy when they go to bed?
Okay.
All right, sure.
Cranberries keep on making me fed.
Making you fed?
That's a nice, okay, so we have cranberries, nice and red. The next line is the bed one, right?
Yeah.
Cranberries happy when they go to bed. Cranberries, keeping me fed. That's actually pretty good for considering we were just going around and we had to rhyme with red. That's a nice poem. All right, so when you look at this bag of cranberries, again, it's like those pictures. You might think, oh, it's just a bag of cranberries. Being a poet means seeing the hidden meanings in everything. All right, not quite everything. If you did that, then you would be a little bit. Seeing hidden meanings in everything is good. But looking at this thing of cranberries, look at it as a poem inspiration. So we wrote a poem just now, back and forth, very directly about the color of the cranberries and what they do, keeping us fed. But you could also write a poem about what cranberries make you think of. For me, it makes me think of spending time with family, because cranberries make me think of cranberry sauce, which I always make for Thanksgiving, which I spend with family. So cranberries to family. And you all have associations like that. If your older brother one time threw a bag of cranberries into your face, then you would have that association with your older brother and maybe getting into a fight with him. All right, so next time you see a bag of cranberries, poem. What we're going to do now is actually write up our own poem. It's going to be a little more serious than what we did with the back and forth, but I hope that was good practice for getting started. So quickly, let's get 5 ideas. 5 ideas for this poem that we're going to be writing out together.
Okay, any parameters?
Not really, but one thing I would say is if one person says rabbits, then the second person probably should do something a little different. So don't go from rabbits to guinea pigs to hamsters.
Right, okay. Evan?
Cats.
Cats, okay.
Okay, we're just getting some ideas now. Go for any kind of ideas. Doesn't have to be, shouldn't be animals at this point. Owen,
Monster.
Monster?
probably. Yep. Yep.
Dinosaur. Well,
Okay, and then we don't have to even be alive, correct?
It doesn't have to be alive. No, it could be really anything. Let's try to get something from history. Any ideas from history? Let's get like maybe one idea from history.
Something historical. Alex.
George Washington.
George Washington. All right. So we have
Max.
Shark.
sharks.
Something from history. Brian.
Twin Towers.
Twin Towers.
Twin Towers. So let's get. We have animals. We have history. Oh, actually, and then just for fun, just throw out one that has to do with food.
Something with food. Somebody knew. Julia. Pizza.
Pizza. All right. So we have a really, really wide range of ideas here. We have the more lighthearted. We have the more serious. We have cats, monster, dinosaur, George Washington, sharks, the Twin Towers, and pizza. If you don't call that a variety, I don't know what is. All right, so now we have the difficult choice of choosing between them. Would you rather have the poem, so I'm going to group cats, monster, dinosaur, and sharks as animals, George Washington and the Twin Towers as history, and pizza as food, and we're going to vote. Raise your hand if you would like the poem to be about food.
Food poem, and pizza in particular?
Yeah, it could be about pizza. We could also expand it a bit more.
Okay.
Raise
Was
your
not a
hand-
great show.
Yeah, raise your hand if you would like it to be about history. So George Washington, the Twin Towers, I see some raised hands. And raise your hand if you would like it to be about animals. Cats, monster, dinosaur, or sharks. Would you say it's pretty much animals?
You think?
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so our poem is going to be cats, monster, dinosaur, or sharks. I guess I don't know if a monster is really an animal. It's kind of in there. Alrighty, raise your hand for cats. Raise your hand for monster. Raise your hand for
Gotta be over.
dinosaur.
Okay, well, some of you didn't raise it at all. So I think, we're
Sharks.
waiting for
Raise
sharks,
your hand
I'm
for
sorry.
sharks.
Yeah, there you go.
Right, that explains all the no reason. Oh, right, so we're writing a poem about sharks. So we have to do this really super quickly. This is going to be a marathon poem, or a sprint poem, I should say. Sharks. All right, so should we rhyme this poem, not bother rhyming?
Rhyme, no rhyme. Raise your hand for rhyme. Raise your hand for it doesn't matter if we rhyme or not. I think it doesn't
All
matter.
right, so let's just start it. It doesn't matter. We can throw in some rhymes if we want. Sharks. Let me think. Gliding flying in the ocean deep. So let's start with that line. That's what I thought of when I thought of sharks. I thought of kind of flying underwater. Flying in the ocean deep. What's the next line?
Next line, Sean.
I hope it's not really steep.
All right. I hope it's not really steep. So, like the underwater landscape. And remember, it doesn't have to rhyme. So if your next line, you don't want to rhyme it, that's great. Next line.
Yeah.
Large shark teeth.
She wants to have large shark teeth.
Large shark teeth. Next.
Luca?
I don't want it to scare me.
I don't want it to scare me. So I'm seeing a kind of pattern emerging here. we're seeing a line about the shark, and we're seeing a line coming from the narrator, line about the shark, line coming from the narrator. And you guys know by narrator, that's the speaker in the poem. So it's the I who's speaking. That's your narrator. So if we do this, first line about the shark, second line from the narrator, line about the shark, line from the narrator, that might actually be kind of cool. So next line would be something about the shark. We have flying underwater, we have the shark teeth. What is another line that would describe the shark? Going chomp, 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 like that. Great. And so line from the narrator.
Line from the narrator. Something with I, yeah.
It might bite it off my feet.
All right. It might rip off my feet. So we're seeing the narrator getting really scared here. It's going from hope it's not steep to I don't want it to scare me to it might rip off my feet. It's kind of going up. In a way, when you write a poem, it's a lot like writing a song or a soundtrack. Like in a song, you have the drum beat in the background, and maybe you have some music that's increasing, it's becoming more dramatic. This is kind of like that. We have the drum beat of the description of the shark, and we have the narrator getting more dramatic. It's a lot like a song. All right, who else? What is our next line about the shark now?
Matt? Sarah?
Sharks are really big.
Sharks are really big. Are really big. So very matter of fact, again, keeping that steady drum beat kind of in the background. And narrator?
Lucas?
You could trample me.
It could trample me. All right, so I'm guessing that it's not easy to be trampled underwater, but the cool thing is we have poetic license, so we can make it possible to be trampled underwater for sure. It might trample me. So, continuing this, really getting scared. Now, as the narrator is saying this, where do you think the narrator is? Is the narrator underwater with the shark?
Yes.
All right, so if the narrator is underwater with the shark, then it would make sense that they're getting more scared. And maybe the shark is coming closer, or they're getting closer. What is another line about the shark?
Out.
It's eating everything in sight.
It's eating everything in sight. So now we're bringing it back a little more to the present. The steady drum beat is picking up a bit. Narrator line.
Narrator Ryan?
I'm trying to get away with all my might.
I'm trying to get away with all my might. Nice. And we can throw in a rhyme. Get away with all my might. And if there's